Good afternoon, all. Welcome to today's webinar, GRIDSMART Software 2010 and STREETSMART V2. My name is Brooke McGee, and I'm a part of the marketing team here at GRIDSMART. I will be moderating today's webinar. That means I will help our presenters with any questions you may have, and I will help keep track of our time. Should you have questions during the webinar, please use the Q&A feature. You can find the Q&A feature in the control bar at the bottom of your screen. Simply click Q&A. A window will pop open, type your question, and your question will be answered out loud at the conclusion of the presentation. Today we have John Isaac, Software Engineering Director, Andrew Hall, Principal Software Engineer, and Drew Edwards, Software Engineer, who will show a preview of GRIDSMART Software 20.10, share the GS2 software release strategy, and security best practices. We also have Corey Crawford, Product Specialist, who will walk us through a demo of the improved STREETSMART V2. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded, and we will send a follow-up email with a link to the recording and additional resources for you. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Andrew and the software engineering team.
Thank you, Brooke, for the great introduction. Excited to be here today. And I'm going to start by giving everyone a preview of the forthcoming release 20.10. The first feature I want to highlight is support for SNMP. So SNMP, for those that aren't familiar, is a network monitoring solution, or protocol really. It stands for Simple Network Monitoring Protocol. And it's an enterprise solution used to collect and organize information about managed devices on a network. So with this release, we're adding support for responding to these SNMP requests to the GS2. We're using V3, which is a major security upgrade over V2, because it features support for authentication and privacy using modern encryption mechanisms. This is something that customers have requested over the years, and we're now releasing. That's going to allow you to see things like the system name, system uptime, and a variety of other data points about your GS2 within your network. So what we're looking at here is the SNMP UI that you will configure within the GRIDSMART Device Manager. When you come into the Device Manager, you'll go to Network and select the SNMP tab. You'll have the option to enable or disable if you want to turn it off for some reason. You'll select the protocol. By default, SNMP uses UDP, but you do have the option to select TCP. The port is 161 by default, but we allow you to customize it to suit your needs. And then you'll set up an SNMP username. This is just what your monitoring solution will use to connect to the GS2 to be able to pull that information using SNMP. The last two things you'll set up are the passwords that get used to configure authentication and privacy using encryption. Of course, I show it enabled here, but SNMP will be disabled by default. So it's something you will have to come in and configure, set up all this information, and once you apply the changes, the SNMP services will start up, and then you'll be able to start monitoring your device. So of course, if you've got multiple devices on the network, you'll then go to each device and configure this and apply those changes so that all of your GS2s are accessible and able to be monitored using SNMP. The next thing I want to talk about is support for departure pulsing. So historically, GRIDSMART has always supported presence outputs. So when a vehicle arrives at a vehicle zone or a pedestrian is walking through a pedestrian detection zone in the crosswalk, we are detecting presence and placing outputs based on those objects being present in those zones. This new feature provides support for pulsed outputs. So the output mode will be a pulse of 100 milliseconds in width as the vehicle leaves the detection zone. This is something that's compatible with UDOT's ATSPM software, and is something that you can then access using your higher resolution data from your controllers, because we're pulsing each detection into the controller as an output. You'll see in the UI here, there's a legend that shows which outputs are configured and what output mode they are selected for, with gray being presence and blue being departure pulses. The next thing is an option to select your detection type. So when you set up a vehicle zone, they may be a stop line zone, or they might be an advanced. And historically, the way we've recommended setting up advanced zones is to draw them, assign an output, but don't assign a phase. What this causes is for that zone to not behave according to the min or max recall setting, which can throw off your coordination by causing unnecessary extensions on those advanced zones. With this addition of the detection type, we are enabling the ability to set phases for your stop line and your advanced zones. That way, all zones within a particular movement and approach will behave according to that min and max recall setting that you've defined. One note is that in order to configure a zone as stop line, it must have a phase, which you'll see noted there in the dropdown for the type setting, where it says stop line zones require a phase. That option will not be selectable if no phase has been assigned. The next thing that I want to talk about is the support for manual zone recall. So for those of you that are current GRIDSMART users, one, we appreciate you constantly joining us for these webinars. And two, this is an extension of functionality that you may already be familiar with. Currently on vehicle zones, you can go in and activate that zone manually, or clear a stuck call or something, maybe due to visibility or something else going on at the intersection. Now we've extended that ability and are allowing you to set custom durations on those recalls. You can now also do that not only at the zone level, but also at the site level. So you can go in and configure a single zone for recall. Maybe there's construction or road work going on in a particular approach, and you want to set recall for an hour to cover that. Or maybe you want to put your entire site into recall for whatever reason is applicable. You can then define how long you want that recall to last. We support up to 168 hours, so it's 7 days. So you can activate your zones for quite the length of time, whatever you need to suit the use case that you've got. I want to talk about some of the engine improvements that we've made. With the engine, we've added we've improved the handling, of nighttime occlusions. So when two vehicles are stacked next to each other and in the area that the cars might occlude one another, that's improved with this new release. We've also improved the sensitivity of moving vehicles, so you're going to get more accurate and better detection. We have reduced the number of false alarms that occur in some traditional camera installations. And we've also improved counting accuracy for any adjacent zones or end-to-end zones. So imagine you've got a situation where two zones are sandwiched together next to each other in the approach furthest away from the camera, or maybe ones that are front to back and drawn right next to each other. The counting has improved whenever you've got zones set up that way. One thing that I don't have a slide for, but I do want to mention at least, is that in conjunction with this release, we're also adding a new modem option that will support Australia, Thailand, Taiwan, and other locales in the Asia-Pacific region. And at this point, I would like to hand it over to Drew Edwards, who's going to talk about our software release strategy.
Thanks, Andrew. As Andrew mentioned, I'm here to talk a little bit about our software release strategy. And our objectives with any time we're distributing software to our customers is we want to provide features in a timely manner. We want to provide timely ongoing security patches. We want to provide bug fixes in a consistent and timely manner. And we'll get into a little bit of terminology here that's important to note when you're talking about GRIDSMART software. We have two types. One is a release, and the other is an update. You can see here the version numbers typically for a release will be something like 19.12, or an update will be something like 19.12.1. And we'll talk more about that as we continue here. Want to begin with talking about releases. As mentioned before, the format is typically the year and the month of the release. So examples of that are 19.12 and 20.10, which Andrew just finished talking about. Our goal for those is to have 2 to 3 releases a year, and they're cumulative. So all the features that are included in 19.12 will be added to 2010 as well. So these tend to be long-running updates. Take about 10 to 15 minutes to apply to your device, and they can be installed using either the update stick at the processor itself, or completely online using the GRIDSMART device manager. And again, these are going to primarily contain new features like the ones that Andrew discussed just a few minutes ago. Devices from the factory are provisioned with the last release starting 2 to 3 weeks after it becomes available. And that just means that generally speaking, out of the box, we'll ship with the latest version with the latest software release. Releases are also available for beta testing, and we really appreciate those of you, if there's anyone on board with us this afternoon who is a beta tester. We really appreciate those folks who get early access to the software, but also provide us with great feedback and often help drive some of the features that appear in releases. So if you're interested in becoming a beta tester, you can email support@gridsmart.com for some more information. And again, you can just sort of see here that this slide is to illustrate that you can update to 2010 from any of the versions listed here, including 6.9. And if you're running 6.9 now and you want to install 2010, you get all the features that are included in the intermediate versions there that are listed. And the same thing, you're eligible to install 2010 from any of the versions listed here. Okay, the other type of distributions we'll have are called updates. We refer to as updates. The format will be the year and the month of the release, followed by a number. And you can see the examples listed there: 19.12.1, 19.12.2, etc. Monthly updates will generally be available, and these will. And just a note on the cadence of our releases. We're going to be releasing software more frequently than we have in the past. But with an update, it's not something that you necessarily need to apply every single update to your processor unless you want the latest patches, or there's a specific fix that mitigates an issue that you may be experiencing. These tend to feature an update will feature pretty short install times, and they can only be installed using the GRIDSMART device manager. And these will typically contain things like engine improvements, small improvements to the software, security patches, including operating system patches, and bug fixes. One note about an update is an update can only be installed after a release. So you can see here, if you're trying to install 19.12.2, you have to have the 19.12 release installed on your system. And as with releases, the last update is cumulative. So in this particular example, 19.12.2 would contain all of the functionality that was included in the update 19.12.1. And again, just to reiterate, you're going to want to only apply an update to the same version number as the release. Just to summarize our strategy, again, software distributions from GRIDSMART will be releases and updates. Releases are going to contain major changes. Updates are generally going to be minor changes, and updates may only be applied to releases. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to John Isaac to talk a little bit about some security best practices for the GS2.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome, and thank you for taking time out of your day to join. Just going to touch on a couple real basic things today, just a few things that you're probably already aware of, but just some best practices that we feel like we need to just mention from time to time. One of the things we do as part of product engineering is we want to make sure two things with our products, that we're continuing to bring them up to enterprise level standard, and we also want to make sure that we're implementing best practices for security as much as possible. So we're just going to walk through a couple very basic things that you can do to help keep your device secure. So on password management, we recommend that you have the master admin account for the device, that you secure that. That's obviously a local account that's on the machine, and like I said, we recommend that you, when you set the machine up, you record that password, put it into a software password vault, and leave it at that. If you're setting up other accounts, you can have other admins. The way we have the software set up, it is role-based, so we recommend setting up admin accounts for users and have them use them on a daily basis. But if you get in a jam and you don't have an admin password, you can go back to your vault, pull out this one, and make whatever changes you need, and you're always protected. And I recommend that for any kind of password management, using a password vault. The other thing is, if possible, if your devices are networked and you have a good solid network, of course we have the LDAP or Active Directory interface that you can use to interface and have central user management where possible, and that will simplify a lot of the management as well. And then a couple things on remote access. So we find from time to time we'll find devices that are actually connected to the public internet, and as a best practice, that's probably something you really don't want to do. And if any device that's connected to the public internet, there's going to be stuff that scan it, and it's just not a good idea. And again, sometimes you're in a situation where you absolutely have to do that, and if you do, then we can make some recommendations. The first thing you want to absolutely do is enable HTTPS. And when you do that, all the traffic that is being sent to the processor is going to be encrypted. That's extremely important. That feature was added to 19.3 and higher. And if you're running 19.12, it's automatic. So if you upgrade to 19.12, which I highly recommend that you do, or higher, latest versions as you can, you'll pick up a lot of these features automatically. The other thing we recommend is that we do provide a self-signed certificate on the device, which encrypts the traffic, but what it doesn't prevent against is what we call man-in-the-middle attack, where somebody can masquerade as a different server. It's not an attack that somebody could do very easily, but they have been done. And the idea is they use that to capture password information. But if you use a signed SSL certificate that you can get from a certificate authority, you can mitigate that man-in-the-middle attack. So that's something you want to do, especially if you're going to access it, again, over a public internet. And then also when you're not online, when you're not using the device, you go in the device manager, actually disable RDP, and of course, change the default passwords. If you're running later versions and you're getting new devices from the factory, we don't support a default password anymore. But if you do have default passwords, change them. And again, if you have turnover and stuff like that, if you keep that master password, it's easy just to remove somebody and go and add other accounts. So I would definitely recommend those practices. And then the last thing I want to talk about today is USB sticks. And one of the things that's interesting, we live in Knoxville. It's where GRIDSMART is. I know a lot of you have been here, and unfortunately we won't be meeting this year for Intersect, which is disappointing. But our actual city actually got hacked with ransomware. The city was down for several months, and it was kind of a big deal. A lot of stuff in the newspapers about it, and a lot of people talking about it. And security, you can you can talk about it and stuff like that, but there's a few basic things you can do, and this is one that really got to think about sometimes. But if you're carrying around USB sticks, which for years we've supported doing updates on USB sticks, and I've done them. They're handy. I've got sitting here looking at USB sticks on my desk right now that I use for different things. But you want to be very careful about how you use those, where you get them from. And again, what I recommend is if you're using a new USB stick, even if it's brand new, or if you have a USB stick, format it before you put an update on it. Then you can be assured that it's fine. And then also when you're not, if you're not intending to do an update, disable the USB drive in the device manager when you're not using it. So that way, somebody couldn't inadvertently try to stick a USB stick into the device unless you intend to have that happen. So highly recommend those. And the other thing I wanted to remind everybody is in the device manager, we have a security audit page, which has been there, I think, since roughly around 19.3, I think is when we put this in here. But it does some quick checks and just kind of does a little compliance check on here to tell you, kind of what you have going on here. It's a good way just to check real quick and harden up a device in a couple of minutes without having to spend a lot of time digging around. So you can hit this page, and again, we're not telling you what to do as far as how you mitigate your own risks. We'll certainly leave that up to you. We'll give you tools to do that. That's pretty much it. And again, we'll keep enhancing the product. As Drew had mentioned, if you get the updates that we have that will come out every month, they will contain all the latest operating system patches, and that's the main reason why they'll come out every month. And they should be fairly small and pretty easy to implement. The other thing that we didn't mention about that also is if you accidentally apply an update to the wrong version, you'll get a little message just saying that there's a version mismatch, and you can, no big deal, and you can just skip it and not worry about it. So, keep your devices up to date as much as you can. I know it's hard sometimes to, especially if you got a big fleet, to be running around doing updates. I know you guys have other business to take care of on a day-to-day basis, but I would definitely recommend that you have a schedule and periodically, keep the processors up to date. And that's going to be very important with any kind of system, to keep the software as current as you possibly can. And just I think if you do that, we'll be in pretty good shape. So that's all I have on that front. And again, thank you all for joining, and we appreciate all of our customers, and reach out anytime if you need any support.
All right, thanks, John and team, for going through that. We're going to shift gears now a little bit. My name's Corey Crawford. I'm a product manager here at GRIDSMART, and I handle, among other things, our STREETSMART V2 platform. And so I'm going to go through a live demo with you today. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. So you should see here a corridor of devices that we have set up here in Knoxville, Tennessee. So if you're not familiar with what StreetSmart is, what we've tried to do with a newer product is take the efficiency that we've obtained with GRIDSMART cameras at the intersection level and expand that to corridor or citywide network level. And so how we do that is we're trying to provide data to the city's engineers and other users who can make informed decisions about the traffic network in order to optimize it. And so we've created StreetSmart as a device that sits out in your cabinets that you have at the intersections and listens for Wi-Fi signals that are coming from any sort of device that's Wi-Fi enabled, whether it be a phone or an iPad or a laptop or what have you. Any device that is Wi-Fi enabled that's traveling through the intersection, we can pick up that device is trying to reach out and ping any networks that are available for it to connect to. And so we listen for that and we identify that device. We can identify it multiple times at each intersection and then identify it at other intersections within the network and determine how long it took for that device to move, or how devices and therefore people and cars are moving throughout your network, and use that to provide that data. And then there's also some data that we're pulling off of the controllers inside the cabinet. If you hook those together, we have some metrics that we can pull off of the controllers and show to you. So I'm going to go through kind of the primary three types of reports that we pull through StreetSmart. That'd be travel time, origin destination, and some cabinet data reports, and hit some applications and some possible use cases that you might see for those. So as I mentioned, this is a network that we have here in Knoxville, Tennessee. And so you can see that I can select a device, and it opens this left-hand sidebar here and shows a couple of different options that I have. So I have some device tool reports. Most of those have to do with the data availability, so how many records and how many unique devices that each StreetSmart is seeing. And so I can do that on a device level. There's also some cabinet tools that I'll get into a little later, and that's that controller and cabinet data that we're able to pull. And then down here you can see some associated routes. And so we can set up routes within the network here. And so I'll go ahead and select one of those routes for us. And you can see it's now highlighted 3 devices moving down an arterial road here that are creating a route. And so we can pull some travel time data off of those. So I'll go ahead. Well, you can see here my left sidebar has changed a little bit. There's some new reports and features that are available to me. I'm going to focus in on 2, this travel time and travel time by segment. So I'll go ahead and run a report, and I can select my data resolution, and I'm going to leave it at the default 5 minutes, but there's some other options there depending on what you need. And I can choose the start date and end date for my report. And so I'm going to select this last week that we just had, and then go ahead and run that report. So that's pulled up now. You can see there's a couple different curves that come up on this graph, a couple of anomalies that I'll hit here in a second, but you can see we've got a pretty good baseline with traffic being low in the early mornings and evenings and getting higher throughout the day and peaking at certain different times. You may ask why there's multiple curves for travel time, and that's because there's multiple ways of measuring travel time or calculating travel time. And so what we do, rather than having just one size fits all, is a couple of different reports that can each provide their own level of insight. And so to help you understand that, I've actually got a graphic that I'm going to share now and go through. So you should see this graphic now. And if you'll imagine, we have 2 intersections along this corridor. If you imagine with me, these blue circles represent our radius that we can detect devices moving through an intersection, and then the same thing with our second intersection here. Then if traffic is moving left to right, then you can see as the device, or as a vehicle with a device in it enters the first intersection, this marker A is going to be the first time we see that device. B is going to be the strongest signal we get from that device. So we measure the signal strength, and when we see the strongest signal strength, that's when the device or the vehicle is going to be at the stop bar. And then C is going to be the last time we detect that device moving through our intersection. And then we have A, B, and C for the second intersection as well. So our default metrics that we use for travel time are down here at the bottom. So you have minimum, which is our free flow speed in between intersections that should be theoretically unhampered by the function of the intersection itself. Strength is our stop bar to stop bar travel time. And then maximum is the total length along that route. So the first time we see a device on that route to the last time we see the device on that route. And then we have 2 other types of travel time that we can calculate here. The first and the last, which is just the first to first So A to A or last to last, C to C here. So I'll go back to sharing my screen on the reports. So if I come back in here, you'll see the default strength, minimum, and maximum are selected. And so you can see those here on the left side of the screen. And I can deselect ones that I'm not interested in and select whichever ones I am interested in. And so I can see multiple different types of travel time, and we just allow this so that users can stay with our defaults, or they can hammer down on one type of travel time calculation that they think best suits their needs, or maybe even gain insights from multiple types of travel time calculations. So you can see here pretty obviously, I'm going to zoom in here. You can click and drag to zoom, and I can zoom in on Tuesday and Wednesday. Looks like we had a couple spikes in travel time. One was around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, 4:30 in the afternoon on Tuesday. We saw travel time almost double from 2.5 minutes to 5 minutes. And then on Wednesday, we saw an even bigger backup around lunchtime. And so I'm not sure if there's anything going on, if there's any construction at this intersection at that time, but if the engineer is looking at this, then they can determine that there was some kind of backup or something was going on at this intersection, obviously something drastic to double or even triple the travel time on this route. And so if they need to go in and make any changes or do some investigation as to what happened, this allows them to pinpoint any trouble spots that they are, that they need to be looking at as the engineer. You'll notice a lot of these reports I'm going to share also will have available as data. So you'll have all 5 of the different reports or the different travel time types listed with each time stamp. And then if you want, there's a button here that allows you to download that as a CSV file and import it into Excel or any similar program to use for any analysis that you might have. And that'll go for a lot of the different reports that we do have. I'm also going to go through travel time by segment. So you can see along this route, we have 2 obvious segments from A to B and from B to C. And so we can break down the travel time along each of those segments as well. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to run those for the last week. Let that run. And so you can see here, we have a green segment and a blue segment, and then the red curve is going to represent our total travel time along the entire route again. So I'm going to deselect that for now. You can see, the green segment is a little bit less than the blue segment, and that makes sense because this blue segment happens to be just a little bit longer, and so we expect it to be on average a little bit taller. But if I zoom back in on these problem days and see what is happening here, so I can see on Tuesday, the spike that occurred, the green segment is showing that spike, but the blue segment is relatively baseline. And so it appears that whatever backup happened, I can not only see that it happened along this route, I can see which segment of that route it occurred on. And so that's where I'm going to start looking to see if there was any problems there, is along this segment where it's spiking here on Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, it appears that both segments spiked. So it looks like the green segment spiked a little bit earlier, and then the blue segment spiked as well. So it's possible that, the green segment is the root cause, but it backed all the way up into the blue segment as well. And so, again, just some good information to have whenever you have any problems along your routes. You can pinpoint those and go after it. So the second type of report I'm going to go over is origin destination. And so I'm going to run a report for that as well. So under this analytics tab, I can go to origin destination, and select OD group. And so I have a group set up for Knoxville. Actually, I think that's the wrong one. I'm going to go for this one. And I'm going to run that for this last week again. Let that run. All right, so there's a couple of different tables that we have associated with this, but I'm going to go into this map view that we have here. And what I can do is select any of these intersections to be my origin. So I can do that by just clicking on one. And so now I've labeled this as my origin. And now a label for has appeared under all the other intersections. And what that represents is the percentage of devices that chose my origin and then wound up at each other intersection as their destination. So 12.4% of people that started at my origin wound up at this intersection north. 65% of people that started at my origin wound up going to this interstate on-ramp over here. And 16% of people went down the arterial road, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's a couple of different ways that we can use this. You can also, before I move on, you can do this in reverse as well. I can select a destination. So now the percentages are a number of people that chose this as an origin and then wound up at my destination. I'm going to go back to selecting this as an origin. So there's a number of use cases you can use for this, whether it be tracking changes in people's route choices due to construction in the area or current events or happenings within the city. There's a lot of things that can affect the route choices that people make. And so we can use this to put data with that. And there's no more glaring example than changes that are being caused by the COVID pandemic and lockdowns that are associated with it. And so I've run this report, for this last week that we've just had, and I'm going to highlight here these two intersections on the right. So 65% of people are going to this road that leads to the interstate, and so 16% of people are going down an arterial road. If you're not familiar with Knoxville, I'll zoom out here a little bit, but the interstate and this arterial road both run parallel all the way to downtown, so they kind of lead to similar areas of interest. It's just kind of a which one will I choose type of deal. And you can see the vast majority of people are choosing the interstate. And these numbers, around 60 to 65% and hovering around 15% for this intersection, these have been pretty typical since about April and May from all of the times I've looked at this this origin destination group, but it wasn't always that way. So if I take us back in time a little bit to October of 2019, before that happened, this is a report I ran for October of 2019. You can see I've got the same origin selected. And now if I look at those same two intersections, around about 50% of people are taking this road that leads to the interstate, and 25% of people are taking the arterial road. And so these numbers were pretty typical, before March, April, May of this year. 50 and 25% were pretty stable from what I've seen from all the time that I've been working with StreetSmart. And so you can see that as the cities had less people on the roads and less people traveling, more people are going to take the interstates and highways across the city. And that's pretty intuitive. We know that. But now, because we have this StreetSmart group set up, we can quantify that with data. So I can see that 10% of riders that are coming through my origin have changed their driving habits and have started taking the interstate instead of the arterial road. What also interests me about this is it's stayed the same, even though Knoxville for the last couple of months has started to open back up a lot. and more people are back on the roads, but we can see that these numbers, the 65% and 15%, have stayed relatively the same. And so people's habits didn't just change for a few months. It appears that they're staying the same for at least the time being. And so we can monitor that. And if people's habits start to change back the other way to where they were before COVID times, then we have an idea of that. So that's a pretty cool use case that you can use. There's plenty of other use cases for origin destination, but that was just one I wanted to highlight. And I wanted to end with talking about the cabinet and controller data that we have. So STREETSMART V2 can hook into the controller that you have in your cabinet and pull some data from the detection at that intersection. So I'm going to highlight this intersection again. And we happen to have GRIDSMART camera running detection for this intersection, but whatever detection you have that's feeding into the controller, we're going to be able to pull data and information off of that. And so I'm going to start by showcasing this current state under cabinet tools here. So I can select that. And now you can see there's a live stream of the phases that are coming in, and I can monitor that in real time. What I can also do is run counts by phase, which is going to pull detection counts from whatever detection is being fed into the controller. We can get that count and upload that for you. That report usually takes a minute to load, so I've gone ahead and run it here. And you can see this is 2 days worth of detection data. And you can see that this intersection is being dominated by the east through and west through movements. And so similar to before, I can come over here and deselect any movements that are not of interest, and I can drill down into the ones that are of particular interest to me. I can drag across and get a number in the top right-hand corner. You'll see there's a number of detections for every 5-minute period. And then similar to before, I'll just showcase again, this is available as a table. It is available for download, or you can save the image of the graph if you'd rather have that. So that is all I had to go over with StreetSmart. And so I'll turn it back over to Brooke for Q&A time.
All right, thank you, Corey, for that StreetSmart V2 demo. We'll now open up the floor for questions. So if you have a question, please go ahead and use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen to submit that. A few of you have already asked questions that our software engineering team has answered. So let's get to the ones we haven't answered yet. Corey, this one was asked during the beginning of your demo. So will this essentially eliminate the need for traffic studies?
So that's what we're hoping to do here is allow you to do those traffic studies in real time and remotely even, and gather that data through StreetSmart rather than having to send a crew out to perform that study.
All right, thanks, Corey. From Michael, is the origin destination feature based on daily percentages, or can it determine morning, midday, and PM peaks?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when I ran the report, so again, under this analytics tab, it'll come back. And you can see that I can select whatever time frame I want to run it for. So I ran it for a week time frame. So those percentages are an average over that entire week, which is generally how we run it, because you're going to eliminate outliers and get a good average. However, you can choose to run it for just the mornings or just the midday or just the afternoons. You'll just have to run the report multiple times.
All right, thanks, Corey. Is there external antenna required for collect StreetSmart data?
Yes, so you will have to mount an external antenna onto the cabinet.
Okay. Do we have any more questions from our listeners today? It looks like we have someone raising their hand to speak. Ken, I'm going to unmute you to allow you to ask your question. Hey, Ken, I've asked you to unmute, so hopefully you can get that notification to ask your question. All right, we might have a little bit of difficulty there, or maybe it was an accidental hand raising. So if we don't have any more questions, we can wrap up for today. Thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar where we went over our release strategy for GS2, along with our security best practices and StreetSmart V2. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us at gridsmartmarketing@cubic.com. We will be sending a follow-up email to you soon with those resources. Thank you all and have a great afternoon.